Dr. Sahasrabuddhe, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you to what promises to be an intellectual stimulating session. As most of you know, he's the head of ICCR, part of the BJP think tank, and author, scholar, and cultural czar. So my first question to you would be, so what is it that we should be learning from the ancients?
Well, to start with, I would disagree with the title given to this session.
Okay.
It is Back to the Past, which may connote like we are going back towards the past, or we are making our back to the past. In the sense, we are turning our back to the past. Neither of this is true. I believe because Indian civilization is always kind of a continuous flow of things. We are in a flux in a way. And therefore, as beautifully put by several people, our journey, civilizational journey, is from the past through the present to the future. So there are enough learnings everywhere, in the past as well, in the present, beyond doubt. And of course, all of us are thinking of the future very rightly. And therefore, it is not back to the past, it is basically to be introspecting, to be looking within, to be identifying ourselves with what we are. That's it.
Okay, so let me truncate the topic. Let's forget about going back to the past. Let's just look at what is it that we, the ancients of India, can teach us. And how would that teachings be relevant in today?
No, I would refer to the new education policy, which has very beautifully put it that the education policy, the national education policy, emphasizes on rootedness in the Indian culture, which is very important. Never in the past any education policy had so candidly, straightforwardly mentioned that we have to have that sense of being rooted in our culture, number one. Number two, it also says that the education should also inculcate a sense of pride about being Indians. Both these things are very, very important, I would say, because after all, when we say, let's take the example of rootedness. When we talk about rootedness, we also have to talk about our ancient past. Let's take example of our ancient scriptures, Ramayana, Mahabharata. Everywhere we have to have several insights gathered to plan our way for the future. ICCR conducts Ramayana festival every year, and we invite troops, dancers and singers from several other countries, Southeast Asia especially, Thailand, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, every country sends. So 5 years back this particular thing started. Couple of years back, when our officials were wondering whether we should be sending an invite to Brunei, which is a 100% Islamic country. And therefore they were wondering whether it would be proper to send them an invite. But they sent, and we decided that send an invite, doesn't matter. They may come, they may not come. But they came, and they made a beautiful presentation about one of the stories of Ramayana. And at the end, when one of our officials over a cup of tea just discussed with them that they were a little hesitant in sending the invitation, the Brunei delegate, a very well-known artist, he told that you are making a mistake. We have changed our religion. We have not changed our culture. So when many societies on the, all over the globe, if they are associating themselves with epics which are essentially an Indian creation in a way, although I am not saying that it is intellectual property right of India only, it is a global and civilizational kind of a thing. But then why should we be shy of talking about Ramayana and Mahabharata? But unfortunately, at times there are people who do not do that. I'll give you another example. Again, about ICCR. You know, about 3-4 years back, the Iranian president visited India. And while talking to the Prime Minister, he mentioned that we have to celebrate Maharshi Panini because he is the grammarian who gave the structure, the linguistic structure to both Sanskrit and Persian. So ICCR decided to have a kind of international conference on the contribution of Maharshi Panini. It happened in the month of December in 2018. I went there in Tehran, and before the inauguration, the Vice Chancellor of Tehran University was explaining me as to what kind of courses there are which are conducted at the Tehran University. And he told me that we teach Upanishad in Tehran. Can you tell me in which university Upanishad is being taught in India? And I had no answer. So, unfortunately, in the past, there were some kind of weird ideas about our past, our ancient traditions, our civilizational values. But I believe that corrections are happening, and with the national education policy, we have every reason to look forward to have a right path selected for the future.
It's interesting that in a radically Islamic country,
That is what I'm saying.
Upanishads
That is what I'm saying.
should be being taught. And when we're talking about history now, again, I think we were referring to it earlier, like history has become a battlefield today. Now, how history is being interpreted, how history is being, whether previously it had the leftist liberal aspect of the historical narrative. Today, there is an attempt to change that. I mean, this keeps going and coming. I was recently heard about how there are certain parts of, in Rajasthan textbooks previously, various large sections of the Mughal history was dropped. I don't know, is that correct? I don't know if it's correct.
I don't know.
So, anyways, so apparently this is
No.
in the new.
I don't know, but the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Education, of which I am the chairman,
Yes.
and when we dealt with the issues about textbooks, their content and the presentation, we didn't look only for the content, but we have given number of suggestions and recommendations for the presentation also. But we observed, because we received close to several hundred suggestions from the members of the public, and people pointed out how kind of imbalance is there insofar as various historic periods are concerned. If we are only emphasizing on medieval history, certainly that is wrong.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And that correction was perhaps needed, which is the general understanding, and I'm sure the new textbooks will have that correction.
Hope so, because the greatest impact two alien cultures have had on India is the Mughal and the British. But I feel that the danger of editing out parts of history would do a disservice to the faith the youth will have in us, simply because youth are exposed to technology. So when they reach 18 or 20, when they have access to technology and they suddenly find articles about Mughal rule in India or British rule in India, they would say, why weren't we taught this? So that could actually, create a crisis of faith in the country. Anyway, that apart. What I have read about the British system of education in India, that in the schools, the British were insisting that at the lower levels, children be taught the local languages, and only when they came to the more senior level that they were taught in English, so that they would be able to serve in the best would be able to serve in the British civil services. Are we following a similar pattern?
Well, I think the emphasis on education in mother tongue, it's something which is long overdue, which was long overdue, and the government has rightly placed emphasis on education in mother tongue. I mean, mother tongue as the medium of instruction. Because, I mean, unless and until we make our regional languages as languages of knowledge creation, knowledge dissemination, these languages will not be able to graduate to that level. If French people can learn medicine and technology in French, or the Kazakh people can learn it in Kazakh language, why can't Marathi be the medium of instruction for engineering and medicine?
No, I agree with you. Absolutely, you're right. But unfortunately, we have many languages in the country.
Yeah, but then now the process has already started, and All India Council for Technical Education has now created that those textbooks in at least 6 languages, as what the parliament was also informed.
Hmm. Now, again, let me ask you a question. Again, continuing to that, a huge number of our youngsters from Telangana and Andhra Pradesh have gone to study technology, do IT tech work in the US and the West. I mean, if somebody hasn't learned the code and stuff like that in English, and mind you, English is no longer a foreign language. English is a global language. So you can't kind of say English like Spanish, yes, Portuguese, yes, French, yes, but English is a global language. So if they are denied that aspect of, in education, how would they be able to compete with the rest?
No, no, but it is not mandatory.
Ah.
Point is, you should have an option available. Today, what happens is, those who are desirous of taking knowledge or learning engineering or medicine, let's say in Gujarati or in Bengali, the doors are closed. It's only in English. Now the doors are open. So an option is something which the government is trying to provide, which is in fact a democratization of our educational medium.
Well, that's a very important clarification. An extremely important clarification. Thank you. What I want to ask you is that English, especially among like people, everyone is not fortunate to be able to speak English like you or me or many people in the audience. Now, English is an aspirational thing in India. Especially when you look at the hinterland, the Hindi belts, because there is a huge shortage of good teachers. And many students find that English opens the doors for them, especially now in the age of online education. So wouldn't it make sense for the government or the establishment or the educational establishment, again, I'm sorry, I got to kind of interrupt a bit myself. The number of English schools have really mushroomed in the north, especially UP, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar. Now the thing is that most of the schools are run by businessmen. They are not run by educationists. As a result, they are willing to pump in teachers who hardly know how to spell apple. At the same time, take huge amount of money in fees from students coming from backward areas or from people who particularly kind of in non-English areas. So wouldn't be a good idea if the government or the educational establishment taught proper English to children at the very basic level, along with Hindi, along with this thing, giving equal importance. I'm not saying prioritize English. Wouldn't that make them more
That is actually happening. Like, for example, I come from Maharashtra. In Maharashtra, English is being taught from class 1. Therefore, there is no bar insofar as learning of English is concerned. And at a junior level, at an early age, a student is capable of learning many languages at a time.
Yeah.
That is the scientific research in this regard, what suggests us. And therefore, there is no harm in that. Point is, we need not unnecessarily attach some kind of a prestige tag to speaking in English. Because our own languages, if we have to respect our mothers, we have to respect our mother tongues as well. And if we don't respect our mother tongues, who else are going to respect them?
No, but I beg to differ because the pride in speaking English, the snobbishness, I don't think it's that prevalent. If you look at the Marathas, they're extremely proud of being Marathi and speaking Maratha. The Tamil certainly, the Telugus. So I think it's a small majority of the urban who are the influencers in many ways who give the impression that speaking English is the most snobbish way.
No, I would humbly disagree with you. Unfortunately, in our country today, English speaking is considered a tag of superiority, kind of, which it should not be. Yes. It is an injustice. Absolutely. To all Indian languages.
I agree with you. Now, again, let's getting back to history. How, history is not really a linear progression because there are so many influences coming in from so many places. One of the disadvantages of the English, the historical education we have had in this country till today is that it is very linear. It is a history which has been interpreted in a particular way by historians with a certain ideological leaning. But the current historians also have an ideological leaning. So perhaps you could, as a education, let's say, an education influencer or an education, especially coming from the government side, and with a certain amount of intellectual acumen in you and the kind of cultural body you have access to kind of form policy, would not it be wouldn't it be a good idea to get an impartial historical narrative?
Yes, yes, yes.
How
Of
will you do that?
course.
How will you do that?
No, no. I mean, the government can certainly set up a panel of historians who can take a call on this, and they would be not biased ideologically. And the recommendations of the Parliamentary Standing Committee, which consists of members from all parties, it is not just a BJP kind of a committee.
Correct.
And all of us are unanimous in suggesting that justice should be done to all periods of our history
Right.
and all heroes in our history. For example, let's take the example of women and those who have contributed in our history, women freedom fighters. Now we know precious little about it.
True.
There was one Kanaklata Deka, a very strong lady and stormy petrel of those days in Assam, but nobody knows about her.
True.
Chand Bibi was a ruler in Maharashtra. Nobody knows about her. She was a queen of Ahmednagar. Likewise, there are Rani Kittur Channamma of Karnataka, for example. So I think women require to be given due respect, proper place. Even Maharani Jhansi or Jhalkari Bai, who was a part of her army, a very brave lady. Now nobody knows about these
So
heroes.
these are the people who get into textbooks.
Yeah, that is what we are suggesting.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
give them a place of prominence in the textbook. Don't just tell us about the medieval period
Yeah,
only.
yeah.
Consider all other periods also
Yeah.
of equal importance
Yeah.
and tell us objectively who contributed what. That's it.
So that's because there was a certain political establishment which had decided the narrative.
Precisely.
And which was actually at the lead of the freedom struggle, let's put it that way. But at the same time, I think that the whole concept of the freedom struggle is what? I mean, the freedom struggle means liberating the nation not purely from an economic or a physical level, but also from a spiritual and a psychological level. I mean, actual freedom is freedom of the mind. That's why they say stone walls do not a prison make. So if you look at the history of India from Somnath invasions to now, I mean, I was reading such an interesting story about how the Brahmins of Somnath actually, as an army, stood and fought against, along with the Kshatriyas, against the invaders. Now, there's a hero, a freedom fighter hero in most Indians from that period onwards. So why not look at a cascade of independent, like streams in a river, independent, smaller freedom movements, which actually contributed to the overall energy of the thing.
Precisely. Even for that matter, the brave fight put up by Lachit Barphukan, thanks to him, we could keep Assam away from the Mughal
Right.
rule for a very long time,
Right.
till 1818 for that matter. Or let's take the example of Mahatma Scindia, one of the forefathers
Correct,
of
yeah.
Jyotiraditya Scindia. Now nobody knows that he controlled Delhi for 30 long years. And it was through him that the British occupied the throne in Red Fort in Delhi. Not, I mean, the power came to the Britishers, not from Bahadur Shah Zafar directly. So I think all these heroes require to be celebrated, but first of all require to be told about through our history textbooks. And that is the simple point which we are making. It's a democratization of national recognition and gratitude towards all these. Let's take the example of Prime Minister's Museum, which is now taking shape in Delhi, in Teen Murti. Earlier, it was only of one particular Prime Minister.
Correct.
Now, all Prime Ministers will be celebrated. We will be saluting the contribution of all Prime Ministers, regardless of which party did they belong, or regardless of what kind of, I mean, how long did they rule over India.
Correct.
So, this is democratization, and that is what is required.
Oh, by the way, I mean, my last question would be, we are talking about building new heroes, right? But there are certain heroes, there could be a debunking also possible. I was doing a lot of research on Ashoka for a book of mine, and Ashoka, who is almost like the Nehru of Jawaharlal Nehru of 300 BC. And the story that Ashoka was the most peaceful emperor, was the kindest emperor, etc., etc., etc. When I started researching, I found that after the Kalinga War and after he became the emperor of Magadha, he had carried a massive massacre of a sect called the Ajivikas by marching to this place called Pundravartana, which is in West Bengal, in that area, and murdered the entire kind of sect, which is a highly unlikely man of peace. And it's also, nobody has questioned the fact is that how is it that a man who had murdered 99 of his siblings, a man who had kind of, was called the Black Prince of, Magadha, a man who had kind of, carried so many invasions in Takshashila, Gandhara, all these places, suddenly who's used to blood, who's used to battle, and suddenly he sees like, about 10,000 or 20,000 bodies on the battlefield, suddenly he says, oh my God, I'm going to be a nice guy. So I think that Ashoka saw Buddhism as a weapon to expand his empire. Now this deconstruction of Ashoka has not been done. It's not been done by your establishment, which has been in power for the last 8 years. I mean, it was not done by various other establishments, like Atalji's establishment didn't do that. So we have simply accepted the profiling of a king by a British, archaeologist or whatever, to turn him into a national hero. So what?
No, I agree. There are many departments which are waiting for reconstruction for that matter, insofar as historic details and the narratives that were built are concerned. And I'm sure this government is out to, as I've suggested, bring in some corrections and also reconstruct as well. Because history, after all, is a part of our identity.
Right.
You cannot disassociate your identity from your history.
Correct.
And therefore, history, while it should be very objectively told, at the same time, it should be presented in a very judicious manner, without any bias, without any kind of demonization of any particular person as such. And this is what I believe is the right approach towards representing our past.
You have a long road ahead for that. And I think our time is up, unfortunately, because this was evolving into such a fantastic discussion. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you,
for
Ravi
being
Shankar.
part of this.
Thank you. Thank you.